I'm pleased to welcome you to the first session of the HR career course. Today we'll be discussing how to define career goals in HR. That's the plan. Overall, the HR career course is one I'm really passionate about because I've been thinking about it for a long time, how to create it, how to structure it. I've long had the desire to help HR professionals build their careers, and I've been publishing materials on this topic and creating content for quite some time. I thought it was probably time to create a comprehensive course because when I was building my own career, I lacked a lot of knowledge. Besides professional knowledge, I wanted to know how to build my career, how to grow, how to achieve higher positions, and how to earn more, how to plan my development. So, the HR career course is the answer to those questions I asked myself when I was building my career, when I was at the beginning of my journey. And for you, these are ready-to-use answers and tools that will allow you to develop faster. Therefore, HR Career is a course about how to build your career in an era where artificial intelligence threatens to replace anyone and everyone. In this course, we'll not only discuss how to build your own successful career, but also how to properly present yourself within the company and to the outside world. This is important because people can work in a good company, try hard, but remain in the same position for 10 years. Away with modesty is our motto. It's time to take your happiness into your own hands and become the creator of your personal success. And I promise to help you with this because in this course I've added something called chat mentoring where I plan to communicate with you, the participants of this course, in a chat, providing individual answers to your questions for 1 year from the moment you start this course. Why you need to take the HR career course. Completing the course will help you move to the next level, maybe even several levels ahead in HR, and of course earn more. In other words, all these investments will probably pay off with just one salary increase. This course has a website that looks like this. And again, I'll start with a brief introduction in case we haven't met some of you. And since the course is called HR Career, we should probably focus on career building, on how my career developed. I started my work as a trainer and recruiter at Alpha Bank. It so happened that I immediately got 2 positions because I had to find loan officers and train them to issue loans. I did this for about 3 months quite successfully, and I was quickly called to the main office to recruit people for the head office without the training role. I agreed, we negotiated, and I guess in the HR career course it's worth bringing up the topic of money too. For example, by the way, I was accepted at the bank as a loan officer. There was a vacancy and it was at the end of my college years. I had studied at the Academy of Banking. I needed to look for a job, and I had internships at 2 career banks. I didn't like it. I was thinking about leaving, and my friend was interning at Alpha Bank. The bank was actually hiring loan officers. They needed a few people. Don't you want to apply? Of course I do. I had heard good reviews about the bank and knew they paid well. I had an internship at Bank. It was in 2004-2005. Well, the internship salary was $50 a month. I worked part-time, of course, as I was studying. Alpha Bank was offering $150. It was good money per month at that time because my classmates were finding their first jobs starting at $100. I agreed, went, and started the training. We were in Kharkiv at the time, but the training was in Kyiv. We were called to Kyiv. And for the training, since I had studied at the Banking Academy and had already worked in a bank before, or rather interned for about 6 months, I understood well what loans were, how they were issued, and how interest was calculated. So the training was very easy for me, plus I had the education. Compared to other guys who didn't have a banking background, I really stood out. I was answering all the questions. When the trainer was interacting with the audience, I'd give the correct answer. You could see how active I was, and I even performed best on the exam. They told me, "Since you're so smart, do you want to be a trainer and recruiter like us?" And I liked the trainer's job. It's so much more interesting than issuing loans. I said, "Yes, I want to." And basically, they offered me an HR position. After I had been issuing loans for 3 months, they called me back for training to learn HR and recruiting. Training, that is, how to teach recruiting to others. They trained me and also asked how much I wanted to earn. Considering it was a different position, I thought about it and figured I'd like about $300. When I told my management that I wanted $300, they almost choked. They said, "Wow, that's quite a request." I said, "What's wrong with that? The job is more complex. You asked how much I want, and I want $300. They said, well, others responded more modestly. I asked what others had said. Some said 180, some 200, so they were asking for a bit less. And it was kind of surprising to me. Why ask for little when you can ask for more? Since we're doing a course on HR careers, this is one of the principles I'll be sharing with you. I guess you and I will be bolder wherever we are. In the end, they gave me, if I'm not mistaken, $250. They said they gave me more than others and that I shouldn't really tell anyone about it. And that's how I started working. I worked for a while and I think they raised my salary to $300. And then they invited me to Kyiv. They made an offer. There's a job. Come join us for recruitment in the main office. Great, okay, but I need somewhere to live in Kyiv. Give me enough money so I can rent a place. Well, they asked how much and I said, well, it's still $300 there. Let's make it 600. We said again, what's going on? We have $350 for this position, but we don't have more. Well, then how can I go? I'll be spending all of that just on housing. Long story short, they looked for other people for about a month and then came back to me saying, okay, come for an interview with the director, we'll talk. I talked with them, said I'm interested, I want to, I can do it, but there's the apartment issue, and they gave me these $600. To be honest, I found not an apartment but a room, initially for $50, so it was a big increase for me. So if I started working at the bank in November, by August or September, I was in Kyiv, starting with $50, and somewhere in September I was already getting 600. This happened over the course of a year, and I didn't stop there. I was performing well, and they offered me some other projects. Let's have you do exit interviews. Let's do a student program. I'll take on student outreach. Let's do career pages on the website. Yes. I started growing from specialist, then to senior specialist, lead specialist, chief specialist. From $650 to $800 after the annual review, then up to $1,000. I always wanted to build a career. Always wanted more. I was very ambitious. Plus, I had huge plans and all that. And of course, recruiting was in high demand then in 2007, lots of vacancies, lots of offers. I started looking around, and as a recruiter, I received an email from a competing bank addressed to the respected recruiting team. We also need recruiters, let's talk. I responded. I was interested, I was young. I went to talk, it was a competing bank. They asked how much money I wanted. And I was already used to asking for twice as much. I said, I want $2,000. They were like, okay, fine. They talked to me, everything seemed fine, and I went for an interview with the HR director. They made me a job offer. I was a bit surprised because I didn't think they would go for it. But if you're making $1,000 and renting an apartment, which I was at the time, then $2,000 is a completely different standard of living. So I decided to take this step. I thought, okay, I'll agree. I go to my manager and tell him about it. That's how it happened. I threw out the number 2 and they actually gave me 2. I guess I should go for it. It's such a lot of money for me. I'm a young professional. To which my manager says, well, we'll offer you something too. I don't know. I'll talk to the human resources director. They called me to the director's office. Don't go to them. They're our competitors. They wanted to poach me too. We're not letting you go. We'll give you $2,000 as well. And that's how I went from $1,000 to $2,000. And this was my about 2.5 years with the company. I grew very quickly. That's how I started my career. Then the crisis of 2008 began. All markets collapsed. Alpha Bank shrank from 6,000 people to, I don't remember exactly, something around 1,000. In our human resources team, there was me and one other guy. We were the boys, the rest were women with children, and there were so many recruiters. But when there's a huge downsizing, recruiters aren't needed and someone had to be let go. And the choice fell on us boys. So I started looking at other options and went to a fast-moving consumer goods company. It was retail plus fast-moving consumer goods there. I worked for them for a year. It was so interesting. I always wanted to become a human resources director. And in this company, when they were hiring me, they asked what to write in the contract. And I asked if I could write anything, and they said yes. You can write human resources director. They told me, hey, write director. I became a human resources director at 24 years old. Well, actually, it was just a title at first, but then I got employees and became a real human resources professional. So, not to drag it out too much, as I want to get to the main content quickly, my career continued to develop quite rapidly. I went to a television channel as the head of recruitment and onboarding in 2010, and a couple of years later I became the acting director. And as a human resources director, I worked for 4.5 years. Wargaming started trying to poach me. They reached out to me and started offering me a job with relocation. I decided to take the plunge. I was interested in this industry. I went as a human resources business partner. After working for 1.5 years, I became interested in moving to Total Rewards. I joined Total Rewards. But I became very sad and lonely abroad and I wanted to come back. I returned and Preply reached out to me. They had been learning from me. They offered me the position of Human Resources Director to build the Human Resources Department. I agreed. I built and structured it all in a year, and then I had active work on my courses in parallel. The guys immediately wanted me to stop doing the courses, to which I said no. I will only come work for you if you are okay with my courses. And it turned out that there were more and more courses. The guys at the company do not actually prefer that you give yourself entirely to the company. And we parted ways. I went to build a system similar to Pritula's. I built it and at the same time recommended they invest in a system, which they did. And then my path somehow intersected with PeopleForce, whom I also helped take their first steps, advised on functionality and so on. And parallel to all of this, my academy was developing. And then I realized that, in general, the academy is my calling. Teaching other people is my vocation, so I focused on that. I see your question, let me read it out. Interesting rule, why ask for less when you can ask for more? Yes, that is exactly right. But why should a business pay a lot when they can hire someone else who is also good? How do you deal with this fear? Especially if there are actually good colleagues who could be called upon. Well, you see, asking and demanding are different things. I would not even put it like that. I have never demanded anything from anyone, never threatened, never blackmailed. If I was asked, I made a request. Honestly, I do not even remember ever doing it. I think only once. There were 2 times when I asked for a raise. It was at a fast-moving consumer goods company where I worked for a year, and at the STB TV channel. Because I initially asked for a higher amount, we agreed on a lower figure than I initially mentioned, but with the understanding that we could revisit it later. And I simply reminded them that we had such an agreement, that time had passed, and asked if we could revisit it. In principle, I was more likely to state a higher amount when asked, rather than asking for more later, so I probably didn't have any fear, because they ask you, you state your price, and then you can negotiate. In my work, I rely on best practices. In general, I immediately understood that if you want to succeed in your career, you need to look at the best, align yourself with the best, learn from the best, because if you look at mediocre performers, you won't achieve anything. So throughout my career, which will soon be 20 years long, I've been looking at the best, and I recommend you do the same. And I try to be such an example for many people. I would appreciate it if you could write about yourselves what positions we have gathered here today. Write in the chat what your position is, so that we can understand who is interested in the topic of HR careers. Meanwhile, I will tell you the standard story about our homework. There will be homework assignments in this course. All classes and all homework assignments, the completion of which will allow you to receive our diploma. We issue the diploma on an excellent platform, so consider it a kind of international certification confirmed by a diploma, so it is worth putting in the effort to get it. Okay, I can see the chat now. Great. Moving on, course curriculum. Today we are talking about defining career goals in HR. I will give you a bunch of great tools that, when applied to yourself, will already help you quite a bit. But of course, that is not all, because the main part will be all these other sessions where there will also be tools, approaches, recommendations, my support, my experience, and so on. In the second session, we will talk about developing key skills. The third is building a personal brand. Believe me, in an HR career, this is super important. It is really, really important. Mastering resumes and interviewing is not about looking for a job if you are satisfied with your current position. Within the company, you often participate in various competitions. You make proposals, you communicate. I mean, even at Alpha Bank, I went through interviews for some positions several times, presenting myself. You need to know how to do this. Career development and growth planning. This will be the 5th session. The fundamentals about careers, where we get to the very essence. And here we'll talk about developing a career-building strategy. There will be work with mentors and coaches. And of course, we'll talk about adapting to changes, the future of human resources, and working with artificial intelligence, because right now, artificial intelligence for human resources is, like Bitcoin was for everyone, especially for information technology professionals in its first few years of development. In other words, those who quickly figured it out, those who started using it quickly, they then grew very well. The same thing is happening with human resources right now. Those human resources professionals who are now quickly delving into the possibilities of artificial intelligence, how it can be used, how they apply it to themselves, gain a huge competitive advantage. So I'll talk about this in the 7th session as well. Today, this is the program for the session. We can probably just move on to the actual lesson so as not to drag it out too long. I would like to start today's lesson with the concept of the ideal job. I came across this concept some time ago, and for me it was a complete paradigm shift. In 2010, I decided to study coaching. I was a young manager then, and my team was growing. And I already had about 10 people to manage, but I had never learned how to manage people. I mean, I had some people I assigned tasks to, I had subordinates, but still, my supervisor told me, try learning coaching. Coaching provides a great tool specifically for management. I agreed and went to study. That is where I was introduced to the concept of the ideal job. I really liked it. And I started asking myself from 2010 onwards, as I was building my career, whether my job was ideal for me or not. The essence of an ideal job is analyzing how three areas converge in your career. In other words, a job is considered ideal when you know this is about job searching. And there are also three similar areas on the flip side that reflect when you are already working. And this is, I know what I want, I have a job I love, a passion I enjoy, I am a professional at it, and I am well paid for it. That is why there is an ideal job test. I suggest you take it in an express format, and in the additional materials it will be in an expanded form. Here we'll have 5 questions and there will be 10 questions. Let's begin. I'll even skip this option and we'll start with this one. Love for your work. There are 5 statements here. I suggest you answer on a scale from 1 to 10 and calculate how many points you got. 0 points means you strongly disagree with this. 10 points means you completely agree with this point. Count from 0 to 10, you can have a maximum of 50 points. And if it's not too much trouble, please write in the chat how many points you got. Later I'll share this presentation in the chat. For those who want to go through the entire presentation, or there's also a document which contains the same tool but in a more detailed format. It's a document like this. I'll share it at the end of the class. This document will be for homework. Here it's presented with 10 questions for each point, and here it will automatically calculate everything for you. There you go, 44, 45, excellent. Then I would recommend you calculate for the other areas. Well, since you finished quickly, let's calculate here how many points you get using the same principle. Let's see, it's even interesting. We have 3 people who actively spoke up and wrote their results in the chat, and they're almost identical. 44, 45, 43. I'll give you a chance to take this test and then I'll show you another screen. So go ahead and write down your scores too. How much do you get here? 40, 41. These are very similar numbers too. Excellent. And the last test follows the same principle. 5 questions, 10 points maximum. Calculate how many points you have here. You consider this the income slide. You see, regarding the question about salary, I guess it's also a question of how much each person needs. I always had ambitious goals for salary because I'm an ambitious person by nature. I had high expectations. My parents, by the way, which is good. My parents didn't give me an apartment or a car, but they paid for my education, probably the best one possible. They gave me a computer at a fairly young age and helped me upgrade it multiple times. So they invested in my development. That was great, but that's where it ended. So when I finished university, I didn't even have a place to live. I mean, I didn't have housing. I needed to rent a place because my parents' home was in another city. So right after graduating, I had a mindset. I had to earn enough to support myself, buy a place to live, an apartment, a car. No one was going to help me with this. And moreover, I would need to take care of my parents, which I later did successfully. That's why my income ambitions have always been high. I've been in this situation in the company multiple times. I'll tell you now, there were 2 times when I was the most expensive employee in the company, earning more than the chief executive officer. And there were many times when I was on the list of the most highly paid employees. In general, even at Alpha Bank, I was among the top 150 highest paid employees out of 6,000. So it's ambition, necessity, probably opportunity plus development. That's why I earned much more than my colleagues in the market and in the company. To be honest, this has its downsides. When you're paid more than the chief executive officer, and the chief executive officer is the one paying you that much, they expect more from you than they do from themselves. And these are very high expectations. It's difficult to live up to them, and they want to cut costs when they think, damn, we're paying you so much. They might consider hiring someone cheaper, 5 times cheaper, thinking they'll get something similar. So that's how it is. It really keeps you on your toes. But it's interesting. Maybe it's not for everyone. I don't know how much this applies to you. I'm looking at your answers here. 10 at most, I see 17. If you add up your 3 answers and all the points, let's say you had 40, for example, 17, you'll get some number here. Try to do that. You wrote your answers in the chat, so it should be easy for you to add up at least 135 points. Great, you're on the right path to the stars. 120 points. Good, you're already doing your life's work, but there's still room for improvement. 119 is not bad, but it's not the best. If you have less than 104 points, you're just at the beginning of your journey and have a lot of work ahead of you. And if you scored less than 62 points for all 3 questions, it means you're definitely in the wrong place somewhere. By the way, this test came after my coaching training. I studied seriously there for 10 months, 40 sessions, followed by a lot of practice. I then coached people for some time. Now it's more in the format of advising and consulting, whereas before it was pure coaching. I had people who came to me and we did these tests. There were people who had jobs but were in the wrong place, and we were thinking about how to radically change their jobs. All right, let's move on. You are of different ages. I don't know how old you are, but perhaps some of you feel like quite mature experts and might think, what career at my age? I should just focus on finding a job. But remember, it's never too late to build your dream career. There are many people in the world who started something new at 50, 60, or 70 years old and succeeded. Take Colonel Sanders, for example. He's not mentioned here, but he started KFC when he was almost 70. So no matter how old you are, it's never too late to build a career. Yes, age has its peculiarities, but still. How do you choose your dream job? The first question, or set of questions, that I would ask if you had a problem with finding your dream job would be these. Where would you go to work every day with joy? What profession? We are talking about an HR career that allows you to utilize your knowledge and talents. In what kind of work do you see meaning for yourself and society? What kind of work will allow you to achieve your goals, and in which profession would you like to improve? Next, you should write down different options for yourself. For example, if you do not know exactly where you would like to see yourself in HR in the future, list your options, such as HR business partner, HR director, head of recruitment, and rate them out of 10. This is not homework. Rate on a 10-point scale how much you like each position, how much these positions utilize your talents, leverage your experience, and how much you think you could earn well in them. Add up the scores, and this simple tool will help you assess which career would suit you best. Furthermore, I have noticed in building a career, I have experienced this myself, there is a problem that prevents people from developing, asking for a promotion, other projects, or simply a higher salary. It is called imposter syndrome. These are people who often actually know more than others, are aware of their areas for development, yet feel they are not good enough when they see other people around them who they perceive as more successful. It is believed that statistics show 70% of people suffer from imposter syndrome. Chances are this problem might not have passed you by either. For example, if we are talking about imposter syndrome at work, for instance, when writing a book, a person might think, this is coming too easily to me. I must be writing garbage. I need to redo everything. Oh, this is hard for me. I guess I am not cut out for this. I should do something else. Even though the person is actually writing great stuff, they just do not recognize it themselves. How does imposter syndrome manifest? Typically, these people have low salaries that do not get reviewed. They are afraid of any kind of assessment. They often overthink and compare themselves to the best in their profession and doubt themselves. They do not take on interesting projects, do not try for interesting positions, and so on. The downsides when this occurs: stagnation, self-criticism, and energy drain. You set yourself up for failure, do unnecessary work, live someone else's life, and earn little. On the plus side, you're constantly developing, you're dissatisfied with yourself, and you're building anti-fragility, that is, resilience to any difficulties. By the way, an example of imposter syndrome is in the cartoon Kung Fu Panda, where this bear, or rather panda, underestimated himself. He thought he couldn't do anything, but his master helped him understand that no, look, the secret ingredient is in you, you can do it, you know everything, just practice and it will work out. What do you think about yourself during these times? Am I a shameful nobody who's wasting people's time while others are watching and thinking, actually he or she is doing a great job? Why isn't she moving forward? Why isn't she in a higher position yet? Why isn't he asking for a raise? These are the kinds of conclusions people draw. Why is this so common? Why do people suffer from this? First, many people present themselves very impressively without having achieved much, and you start to think that you're not as good as them. There are infobusiness people, marketing, social media. There's huge demand, resulting in many followers, and a shortage of quality experts to compare yourself with. And behind all this, it seems like you're not very good. You might think you're not at the right level, that you don't have the right, but if we take the example of writing books, or if it's about a career, you might think you don't have the right to be an human resources director or hold the position you want. The solution is to work on yourself, package yourself professionally, and work on your self-perception. I would recommend starting by describing your successes. It so happened that when I was building my career, I often underestimated myself too. On one hand, I wanted a lot and did a lot because of it. But I often underestimated myself and didn't position myself well to my superiors. I was always surprised by people who achieved much less but positioned themselves so well and talked about themselves so confidently. For example, when I interviewed them, they acted as if they were some kind of gurus, really impressive people. But when I started discussing what they actually did at work, I realized that I was doing much more. But I didn't feel that way about myself. So you talk to someone and they puff themselves up, whether it's a man or a woman. And they're like, I did this and that and implemented this and that. And I'm thinking, damn, I didn't do that. I was so curious. I started asking, what exactly? How did it work? I looked closer and it turns out they didn't actually do anything. They were just pretending, saying things like, I built a performance management system. What exactly did you do? Well, I helped conduct performance reviews. How exactly? Oh, I scheduled meetings. I'm thinking, well, I developed a questionnaire, did some other things. I don't call that building a system. So I lacked this ability for a long time. I really had to teach myself to describe my successes at first. I even had a funny situation once regarding my achievements. When I went to work for the STB TV channel, I asked for a salary of, I think, 36,000 hryvnias, which was $2,000 at the time, and they offered me less 1,500. But they said a review was possible. Work for a while and we'll revisit this conversation. After working for about a year and accomplishing a lot, I thought I was probably worthy of a raise to the amount I initially wanted, and I proved that I could do what I was supposed to do, and I did it. I went to the management and said, "Remember our conversation?" But no one remembered anything. I reminded them, but they said probably not. But they asked me to describe my achievements. I started seriously describing my achievements. I was surprised myself at how much I had managed to accomplish in a year. You know, my self-esteem grew right there inside me. When I sent all this to management, they said, "We need to meet with you. Let's have an informal chat. Talk about life." They met with me and said, I don't know what the reasons were, probably some internal reasons. They told me, "We won't give you a raise, but we'll pay you a bonus." $5,000. I later calculated that I had wanted an additional $500. For a year, that would have been $6,000. They gave me $5,000 in advance for my work. That's pretty good. It's strange why it happened like that. Apparently there was some, I don't know, internal situation, political, maybe something else, why they couldn't officially raise my salary to the level I wanted, but they gave me the money. Publish your achievements. If you're making a resume, just write down your achievements there. Make sure you know what's written in your resume. Also publish your achievements on LinkedIn. If you write columns somewhere, we'll talk about branding in our classes. Write about your achievements there too. Don't be shy. Tell other people about your achievements. When you've told someone about it many times, you'll start believing it more yourself and become a mentor for other people. There's surely someone who is at an earlier stage of development than you, and you'll discover new depths in yourself. Moreover, when you mentor someone, you develop quite well yourself. Try, maybe even write a book. I also have experience with this format of writing a book. It's even motivating and inspiring for a while. What else interesting I can say about careers? Your income, which is an indicator of career success, depends on 3 factors. First, your skills. We'll talk about this a lot, and indeed, a career depends on the level of skill development. But often we develop these skills, and for some reason nothing good happens to us as a result. It's not enough to just develop them. You need to start applying them. That is, you should strive to apply your skills as much as possible in your work. And the third dimension is that you need to learn how to monetize this application of skills. That's when you'll have a good income, and then you'll have a career, plus income, plus love for what you do, the perfect career. Another concept I'd like to suggest you think about is that your career is a product that you create. Look at your career as a product. Think about it. If my career and what I do is a product, we can use the tools that marketers use for products. For example, think about who its target audience is. What are my product's features? And how, for example, is it different from other people's products? What positioning do I have in my mind? Who am I? What do I do? Such packaging, as any product should have packaging, this is where the packaging comes in. What promotion? How do I promote this product? This view of your career as a product will allow you to see some outlines and manage it better too. You can go further and think more interestingly that in essence your career is a business that you manage. You develop this business, you can invest in it. For example, if you buy an HR career course, you are making an investment and it can pay off for you, it can bring you money. You can transform your business, turn it into a different business. For example, you worked as an employee, started freelancing, or created your own recruiting agency. You can scale it, think about how to grow it. Moreover, if it is a business, it has value. There is a rule in startups. Successful startups take their annual revenue and multiply it by 5. Speaking of yours, take your annual income. For example, if you earn $2,000 a month, that is $24,000 a year, but your business is now worth $120,000. Take in that figure. Next, if it is a business, then the business has a business model. So I would recommend looking at your career as a business to fill out a business model canvas and think about who your key partners are. Who helps you build this business both inside and outside the company? Let me give you a hint. For example, our academy can be your partner in building your HR career business. That is your core activity. What do you do? What resources do you need for this? What value do you create? And really, who are your clients in this business? What kind of relationships do you build with them? How do you find them? Through what channels do they interact with you? What costs do you have for your business? You might be surprised that you're not spending anything on your business. You're only trying to squeeze profits out of it, but that's also strange, wouldn't you agree? And what's your revenue structure? This business model is very interesting and can be applied to your career. Now for the analysis itself. If your career is a business or a product, then SWOT analysis tools are applicable to it. Take a look at your career. I didn't change anything here. I left it as a business example because I wouldn't want to write your possible strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for you. I'd like you to discover them for yourself, so think about it and write down for yourself how your career is like your business. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses that need to be addressed? What external opportunities are there for you and what threats could hinder the development of your business? And for the second part of external analysis, there's a tool called pestle analysis. Think about it, I didn't write examples for you here either, so as not to nudge you towards any particular answer. When you're given examples, you tend to repeat them rather than discovering them entirely on your own. What are the external factors in the areas of politics, economics, society, technology, environment, and legislation? What's happening now in your country and in the world, and how does it affect or could affect your career? And what opportunities and threats do you discover for yourself there? Next, it's very useful for your career development to know your characteristics, your traits, your preferences. Personality assessments are great for this. Let me tell you about my experience. I first encountered a more or less serious assessment when I was working in an FMCG company, and I was recommended a book by Adizes. I didn't know about this book. The CEO's assistant says, "Listen, it was 2009. Have you read Adizes' book?" I say, "No." "Listen, there's such a cool description of a manager there. It's an exact copy of our director." And he was very hot-tempered, emotional. "Read it, you'll find it interesting." I thought, well, since it describes our director, I need to learn all the keys to him. I took this book, The Ideal Executive, read it, understood who it was talking about, understood how to communicate with him, and started to apply it to myself. And what about me? Later, when I started working at the CTV channel, we experimented with different tools. Thomas Disk assessment, Hogan assessment, there was another one too. I also underwent an assessment along with several managers. We read the results there, and I also started thinking about what kind of person I am. And then some consulting company, I don't remember the name, they wanted to work with us and said, "We also have a DISC assessment, but we interpret it our way. Let's give you a free assessment and provide feedback." I said, "Well, let's do it." And I took the DISC assessment again with feedback, but this time they talked to me. Then they said, "You're like this and that." You need to have an operations person nearby. And this helped me understand myself better. Since then, I started to shape someone in my team who would take on the operational responsibilities. I had such a person at the TV channel. In wargaming, the structure was a bit different. There I worked more closely with an analyst. At Preply, I had a people operations manager. So I understood. And in gaming, when I was working on a pilot project, we were testing the StrengthsFinder talent assessment tool. I took the test and also received talent coaching. It really helped me understand who I am, what I'm like, what I should focus on, and how to develop it. It really helped a lot with my further development. That's why it's useful to go through this. What are the options? Is there MBTI? You can find tons of tests on the internet. There's DISC, that's also an option. There's Hogan, they have paid tests. There is one that's been translated into many languages. It's one of the best and it's free. I would either recommend this one, or you can take the DSK test if you've read the book. Interestingly, there's a free test on their website. Reed has his test too. He was a fan of MBTI and then developed his own test. And there's a talent test or the Gallup StrengthsFinder. I would probably recommend taking the Gallup StrengthsFinder if possible. It costs $20. It's great to know your talents and apply them in your work. Now let's talk about developing a career plan and goals. I would recommend that you clearly formulate for yourself even if you're not taking this course. Usually if you are taking it, we'll work on this. We often dream about something, want something, but rarely set goals for ourselves. Take it, write it down, let it be part of the exercise for today's webinar. What specific position do you want to hold? What position do you dream of? In what kind of company? This doesn't mean that you'll actually work there, but this is your benchmark. For example, I long dreamed of working at Google. But in Ukraine, their office was tiny, there wasn't a role for me. I talked with the CEO, Dmitry, several times over the years. Dima, let me be your HR, I said. I'm ready to work with you on your terms. We don't need it, we're small. And no matter how many times I tried, it didn't work out. But thanks to my visualization that I wanted to work as HR director at Google, I was invited to Wargaming. It was very close to Google. I worked in an IT company which was also quite close, so it manifested a little differently. Decide for yourself, by what date would you like to achieve this? How much would you like to earn per year including bonuses? Just decide, think about it. For example, I always dreamed of a salary of $10,000 a month. To have recognition in the community, thanks to which you'd like to attend conferences as a speaker or something else. And what kind of projects would you like to implement? You need to formulate such a table as a set of your goals. Next, understanding different roles in HR. In HR, you can build a career along different trajectories. I once sat down and drew a list of different trajectories in the format of a subway map and developed a very detailed table with all the positions, a list of requirements and what level of knowledge is required. This table is available via the link. There's this good map I came across where they took what's called the big model. Dave Ulrich's model, essentially they slightly reworked to some extent. And they drew different positions. Here you can literally draw a career path for yourself from one position to another. And to assess your knowledge for career building, at the Academy, we've developed a knowledge checklist that covers all possible knowledge areas and allows you to see your gaps that you need to fill. So for career planning development, I recommend filling out such a checklist as well. Next, for those who are already on the course with us, I suggest you message me individually in the chat to discuss your career situation. I've written a list of what I'd like you to send me, plus anything else you think is necessary, and you can ask any questions, and we'll chat with you. And from the moment you start this course for a whole year, I'm ready to start corresponding with you, communicate, give you some comments, and answer your questions. In other words, I'll be your mentor, guiding your career for a year to help you build your dream career. What do I recommend reading? So, HR Careers, Everything You Need to Know. It's a great article about building a career, our personal development map. And in our chatbot, there's an option to purchase a book that I once wrote with a colleague, The $1 Million Resume. This book, although it sounds like it's just about resumes, is much broader. It's really about careers in general. It costs just $15. You can buy it by going to the chatbot, hitting / and selecting book. Yes, there will be instructions. Now for the homework. For those who are taking the course with me. Everything needs to be done in the file. Basically, in this file, which I'll show you again, you need to complete a self-assessment of your knowledge, checking all these boxes. There are 600 lines here. It covers absolutely all HR knowledge. Take the ideal career test. You've done the shortened version before, but this is the full format. Here, there are 10 questions for each item instead of 5. Then, outline a few career options for yourself, rate them on a 10-point scale, and then fill in your understanding of your business model as someone who manages their career. Complete a SWOT analysis for your career situation and formulate the goals that I've shown. And take a look at the competency map for reference. The cool thing here is that you can select 2 positions. For example, your current and desired positions, and compare which competencies differ between these roles. That is, what additional skills you need to learn. I've listed all of this here as homework, and it needs to be done. With that, our first session is coming to an end. Next, we'll be talking about developing key skills. We'll discuss creating an individual development plan. I'll share a template. We'll talk about how to develop hard and soft skills, how to learn effective communication, leadership qualities, and time management and project management skills, which are also important in an HR career. The course costs $400. There are also packages that include coaching and live calls in addition to chat messages. You can choose these packages as well. You can choose the most comprehensive package where career growth is guaranteed. You can't escape it. That's all for today. Thank you to everyone who was online with me and chatted with me. Once again, I invite you to join the course. You definitely won't regret it. Bye.